Hello everyone, welcome to the world famous MGA Masters Guild of Acadiana Intro to Construction class. I am Grant Alexander, Head of Talent Development for MGA. Excited to do this video for you. This is week 4, your video supplement for Intro to Construction. Before we get into week 4, let's do a quick recap of what you have learned so far. So week 1, we talked about the traits of the trade, our values, attitudes, and learning systems. Our values here at MGA, our 3 core values are time is valuable, think it through, and pride pays. On the attitude side, we had David Wooten with Wooten Construction come in and tell us about a little thing he calls the backwards cow. It's WOC, where it starts with the willingness. You have to be willing to do something. Opportunity, you have to seek and find the opportunities and have the capacity to execute those things. Then we talked about our learning system, which is the cycle of performance. And that attitude piece of it is so important because that will dictate how much knowledge you absorb. And then we give you a space to practice, which increases your skill. And once your skill is up, guess what? Attitude goes up. You start craving more knowledge. Also in week 1, we learned math fractions. What's in an inch? We learned how to read a tape measure and all the things that go into that and its uses. Week 2, we talked about the skills of the trade, how the trades work together, why it's important, and the simple skills that translate across the trades. Jeremy Cantrell with Artisan Specialties came in and taught us how every system in a building requires different tradesmen to execute. We also talked about why it's important, and that is because failures and claims eat up all of profit, all of time, and they end up costing you and the end user, the homeowner, money in the end. We also learned one simple and valuable skill, and that skill was how to caulk things. We talked about the different types of caulk and how they can be applied. Week 3, we talked about the arts of the trade, design creativity, and the planning process. Davey Wooten with Wooten Construction came in that day, and she told us the importance of asking why. Why do you want it this way? What is the purpose of this investment? We also went through a little bit of how to read a plan. Miss Carrie Dewey with DCA and Masters Guild of Acadiana came in, showed us how to use a scale ruler and why that would be important for us to know anytime we're on a construction site. Then Austin and Lindy with A&L Movers came in and told us how nothing happens until something moves. So what were the proper techniques we used to move material and different equipment that is used to get that material moved safely and efficiently to a job site? And that brings us to where we are now in week 4. If you're watching this video, that means you've either missed week 4 or you're watching this just as a reinforcement of what you learned. So at this point, Ms. Carrie Dewey is going to join me, and we're going to talk about some of the things that we learned in week 4 from a panel of contractors and construction professionals. So week 4 is basically, just to summarize it, how not to get fired. And one of the statistics we talked about in week 1 was 85% of people who lose their job do so because of poor work ethic. And when we say work ethic, we're not saying hustle every angle, grind every day, work 90 days in a row. We're saying while you're on the job, act like you want to be there. And if you display these core values that we've taught and you go through the cycle of performance every time you learn something new, you're going to be someone who's valuable on that team.
Yeah, you don't need to give up your entire life in order to have a successful career. Work-life balance is important. What is more important is that when you are at work, when you are there, that you display those right values and attitudes, and that every action that you take, it resonates, that you're making sure that you're treating time as a valuable asset, that you're thinking things through, and most importantly, that you're taking pride in what you do.
Yeah. Well, one of the things we've seen throughout the country and as technology evolves, people are losing their jobs to robots or what have you. This is an industry that needs humans.
Oh yeah, in 2020, we learned that we are essential. We cannot replace people right now, at least in our industry, especially in the residential sector. We need people who can come in, do the job, do it right, and feel good about it at the end of the day.
Yeah, when you go to bed, you want to be able to put your head on the pillow and say, I did this. You're going to drive by a house one day and you're going to tell your wife or your husband, and you say, I worked on that house.
Yeah, every trades dad ever. There's a meme about it. I did work on that house, son.
I still do it. Drive through River Ranch. I'm like, insulated that house, put floors in that one.
All day long. They've got a killer balcony in the back. You should see it.
Yeah.
Trimmed in bronze.
You get this sense of being a real part of the community, a real part of something that manifests itself in a way that no other industry can really offer.
And just because you have the skill doesn't mean that you can show up and not have the right attitude.
Yeah, one of the stories that one of the people on the panel told us, it was Jeremy. He said, I've had to fire my own brother on multiple occasions. He has just as much skill as me. He can do everything I can do, but he goes through these cycles where his attitude is just so bad, I can't have him on my jobs. He's either unreliable or he shows up in not the right attitude, and the jobs don't go well. They don't become profitable anymore. And at the end of the day, as much as we love this, as much as it's in our blood, we also have a wife and kids to support, And
even if the work is good, customers won't come back if employees have a poor attitude.
Mm-hmm. So then that reflects on everyone in the business. People will call and say, oh, can you recommend someone? I know that installers can be a little shady and all this stuff, and there's this reputation of you're going to pay someone to do something and they're not going to do it really well.
Right.
And that's another goal of ours, is to get rid of that. We're not out there trying to make a quick buck. We understand that when something gets implemented and when something gets put into a house, a human being is going to live there, and it's going to need to function the way it's supposed to function. And no matter how much money we make on something, at the end of the day, if we don't have that sense of fulfillment that we did the job correctly, and that person's going to have problems later, then that's something we want to correct.
At the end of the day, attitude translates into the work. And that's why when the panel got up in week 4 and talked about our experience with hiring and firing and replacing people, and all the effects of not having the right human resources in place, there was a lot of emotion coming out of the business owners, because yes, it really is an awful time when you have to fire someone, especially if it's a friend or someone related to you. You might get the job because it's your uncle running it, but you're not going to keep the job because it's your uncle running it if the profit margins are going down and the customers are not happy. So the reason those business owners were, so intent on driving in these points is because we already have a skilled labor shortage. We don't like to have to let go of someone who has a skill because they don't have the right attitude, but we will every single time.
Yeah. And that goes really back into one of our big values, pride pays. Now we're going to talk about some experiences that we've had with people who either having or not having these values be important to them determined success and failure.
Okay, I love story time.
Story time. I'm going to talk about the first person I ever had to fire. This individual was charismatic. He had all the knowledge. He had all the practice. He had 3 of the 4 things you need in the cycle of performance to be successful. But he did not believe that time was valuable. He rarely showed up to work on time. Sometimes he didn't show up at all.
And he did not communicate the delay.
Didn't communicate the delay. Mm-hmm. Frequently on his cell phone during working hours. And sometimes when he would leave, 30 minutes would turn into an hour would turn into 2. Meanwhile, we're trying to plan and do things based on the knowledge he gave us ahead of time. So we ended up having to let him go, and it was really difficult because of someone I liked a lot, and it was someone who I saw so much potential in. And those are the sorts of things we want to avoid, because it's hard enough to get good people who can do the things you need them to do. So when you have to let someone that good go, it hurts. But when everything's said and done, the team was able to grow because of it.
And it's important, too, to recognize that one person having that deficiency, it really starts to affect everyone else. So when you come to make that decision, it becomes really easy to make what would usually be a really difficult decision, because you have to reward the rest of your team by not allowing that negative impact to undo the things they do.
Yep. Tell us about a time someone did have this value and how that ended up.
So my team really has a great talent of snapping into action really quickly. And so it is important to be on time, and it is important to communicate delays. But one thing we don't talk about too much is how we can be heroes if we don't hesitate and we can get into something quickly. So we had a situation with a new construction house. It was a custom home build by one of our favorite builders who we had been doing work for at the time for years and years, and we had never let her down. Or at least I hope not. I was actually out of town. I wasn't even here. And my team called me that they got word that the house, which was completely done, we were finished, we were on to something else, had not passed an inspection because the firebox was about an inch too close to what the code inspector was deeming to be a flammable material. And then in about an hour and 15-minute span, while I was in a different city, my team simultaneously started researching the specs on the fireplace, the code details, and finding evidence that we had a non-combustible material within the distance that they said, all the while planning for the backup plan, finding additional material to be able to add to the assembly in stock geographically close to where I was, so that they could negotiate a pickup while I was in New Orleans and actually get the material moved the same day. Because had we not been able to get that homeowner to close that week, they were about to lose their interest rate on their mortgage, and that 1 week would have wound up costing them about $1,200. So we wound up being able to solve the problem really quickly because they recognized immediately the value of that time to the homeowner and went to work on a plan A and a plan B at the same time, and they were able to save the day.
Beautiful. In terms of thinking it through, people say, what does that mean, be mindful of the chain of communication? I'll give you an example of that. We have a new contractor that we're working with, does a lot, and we were installing countertops. And the installation company called me and said, hey, they're telling us this isn't the right sink. So they said, we've located the sink they said they want, and we can get it. It'll be $400. We can get it from Amazon. We'll have it here in 3 days, and we can get this sink installed. I was like, okay, hold on. Let me find out what to do. I called you, Carrie, and you said, well, where did the information come from?
Mm-hmm. Who communicated that?
And I said, well, the contractor. And you said, you talked to the contractor? I said, no. You said, who talked to the contractor? I was like, well, the installation company. She's like, who at the installation company? And I said,
where was the chain?
I said, I don't know. So I called the installation company and said, oh, it was the guy installing. Okay. I said, okay. The contractor told him, and this guy I was talking to said, yeah. I said, are you sure? Can you ask him? So he asked him. Turns out the homeowner had given him this information, and that's not part of the chain of command. Mm-hmm. Installers don't take direction from homeowners, they take direction from...
And the homeowner wasn't in the loop of where the sink was, because the sink was actually already there. Mm-hmm. On the job, did not need to be ordered. We didn't need to do all those things, and the cut they would have made for the sink that was about to be ordered that didn't need to be ordered would have made that piece of countertop completely useless. Right. Because it would have been cut incorrectly.
Right. So we did catch it, but
yeah, it didn't go down to the worst case scenario.
But following that chain of communication, right, it could have been stopped before we got too many people all worked
And more
up.
importantly, because we went back down and followed the path back through the right chain of communication, the information we got was accurate and it was what needed to be done. And we didn't waste the effort of going through and addressing something incorrectly when we already had one mark against us.
Mm-hmm. Brilliant. What's a time where someone did think it through?
Well, part of think it through is being aware of your surroundings. I actually had a discussion with my daughter about that this morning in the garden, because I told her, if you don't start paying attention to the world around you, you're going to get a lot of surprises. To which she said, I love surprises. And I said, not every kind. We had a project recently. We were just doing decorative surfaces. We were painting. We were redoing flooring. We had some lighting fixtures we were changing out. And our painter actually recognized that when he was floating the sheetrock to repair it where some wallpaper had been taken off, there was a section of sheetrock patch that just wasn't drying at the same rate as the rest of it. And he stopped and recognized that that was different, that something else was going on there. Now, he's not responsible for the roof, and he's not responsible for anything except for getting a coat of paint on the wall. Had he mindlessly gone through and done his job, we may have not caught immediately what turned out to be an impending structural failure, because there was a rotten support beam that was weeping, and that was why that sheetrock mud just wouldn't quite flash over as quickly as the rest of the wall. Had we gone in and done work in the room behind it as scheduled on the next phase, someone actually could have been hurt, because part of what that beam was holding structurally, we would have actually started to work in that area, and it could have potentially collapsed on our workers. So that would have been an absolute worst case scenario. And I like to think that a lot of people would have caught it after the painter, but still the very, very surface finisher caught something that was a problem that was very, very deep. And so it was an exceptional catch for us that he did that. It was really a best case scenario for a bad problem.
And not his job, right?
But didn't have anything to do with his job.
And could have potentially cost him getting paid for what he had done so far.
Right.
Because if the job doesn't get complete, but he had
he wasn't chasing to the end of it to finish it up he wanted to make sure, because he takes pride in his work.
Mm-hmm.
And he wanted to make sure that what he was doing wasn't going to turn around and fail immediately when he walked away.
Excellent. Tell us about a time where someone didn't believe they probably paid.
Unfortunately, there's a lot more of those stories than I'd hope there would be. One that stands out the most, mostly because it was early on in my career, and at the time I didn't realize what an epidemic a lack of pride in your work was. So I was shocked by it, because I had a lot of pride in my work, and I worked even then with people who took a lot of pride in their work. So I had one particular tile installation company that I used to lean on a lot. In fact, some of the company owners that are partnered with me now were originally installers as employees of that company. So this particular installation company had some of the more highly skilled people on their crew. The owner of that company would very frequently pair together highly skilled and highly unskilled workers, but not in a training sense. More in a letting the highly skilled person go in and do the hard work, and sending an unskilled person, not very well trained, to go do the finish work. So what happened was, we had installations that were beautiful, that were water jet cut and natural stone 10 and 12 foot up walls. And then the really simple little skills that we talk about, especially like in week 2, grouting, caulking, sealing. The installation would not look as good because it wasn't grouted well, it wasn't caulked well, it wasn't sealed well. So it was almost insult to injury, right? Because you had this great piece of work. And it all came to a head with us because I worked on the new construction home of one of our contractors. So it was his personal home. We did a shower design that we had never done before. and a lot of people went in to work on it, and it was just glorious. It was a 10-foot tall wall. The shower actually came in at a radius like a snail and rolled in, and we took natural stone mosaics and we wrapped the entire wall. And the work was beautiful. Some unqualified people were sent in to finish the work. They didn't think it through when they got in there. Didn't have a tall enough ladder to get all the way up the wall. So the area where they couldn't reach to clean the grout off, I mean, they couldn't get up there. So what were they going to do? So they just didn't. And what happens is, once cementitious products cure on top of porous products, it becomes very, very difficult to get it out, especially when it's 10 foot up a wall in a very narrow snail shower. And I was really upset about it because a lot of planning had gone into it, a lot of design had gone into it, and the tile work was beautiful. To have it come down to this was upsetting. And that installation company owner refused to go in and do the work that needed to be done because, and I quote, he said, "You can barely see it from the floor, and I definitely can't see it from my house." He's no longer with us, even in this city at the moment. Stopped using him for work so hard and so fast. Because if he couldn't take pride, then we were not going to be handing over our well-planned projects.
Yeah. Well, I've got a success story. Someone who actually went through this class and really took these values to heart. He actually took them home. His name's Troy. He works for A&L right now. One of the things I asked in week 2 was, what's one of the values that you saw an impact once you learned? And he said, using respectful speech, especially at home, with his kids, with his wife. He said he started to just talk to them in a different way, and his home life started to get better. He was not great at showing up on time for the classes, but after 2 or 3 of them, he was there every class on time as soon as it started. He's now one of the top movers at A&L Movers. They trust him on all their big jobs. They trust him on the jobs that, have to go well. They put Troy on there. And that can be you. 6 months ago, he didn't even have a job. 4 months ago, he didn't even have a job. And he took these values to heart. He made them part of his life, not just what he does at work.
He recognized and corrected his mistakes and actions that were not according to the values.
Right. And now he is a huge contributor at A&L and has a bright future to be whatever it is that he desires to be.
Definitely.
And the other thing that you won't get out of this video, but that is a huge part of MGA, and that is the networking aspect. You are now in contact with all the people you need to know to get you any position that you want to try. That's one of the biggest things we talk about at the end of that class. And one of the biggest things you should know if you're watching this video is this is your opportunity to be around the people who are gonna put you in position to succeed. We want to see you succeed. It is important to us, both for me emotionally and financially. It is important for me to see you succeed. So thank you for coming through the MGA Intro to Construction class. Thank you for watching this video. If you have any questions, please let us know. We'll be happy to contact you or reach out and put you in contact with whoever it is that you need to know so that you can become whatever it is you feel like you're supposed to be. So for Carrie Dewey, I'm Grant Alexander. Thank you so much for watching, and we will see you next time.
Bye.